Thank you, Council and Mayor, for allowing me the opportunity to come speak with you. Over the last couple of years, my wife and I have struggled to try and figure out what, as we watch society changing and we watch things happening, and it's almost as if we woke up and went, when did this happen? And so we've found that when we see something like that, we often have to take some time and study. And so that's what we've done, is we've done a lot of reading and a lot of research, trying to figure out, because we have grandchildren. We don't have any little kids anymore, but we have grandchildren, and we're trying to figure out what prompted, when did this start that all of a sudden we're going to have Drag Queen Story Hour? And when did that happen? And so I'm going to take you down just a little bit of a journey. I won't take you through all the hours of it, but just give me about 5 minutes or so. In the United States, the first recorded drag queen was a man named William Dorsey Swan. He was born in 1860. And Mr. Swan was a slave, and then, of course, after the Civil War, he was freed. And he took himself down a road that was quite dark and sordid, and was arrested several times. But what he started doing is dressing up in high society at that time, women's clothing, and would hold private parties. And these parties would be very sensual. They involved a lot of sexual things. And he was arrested, jailed several times. But if you can say, the cat was out of the bag. And so this started the journey of what we know today as drag queen. The system, or the culture of dressing up in women's clothing stayed quite underground, especially through the turn of the century into the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It was primarily a very private affair. It was most of those who dressed up in drag, as it was called, were homosexual males, and it was very much a subversive sexual activity, very erotic. It stayed that way for quite a while until the sexual revolution in the 60s, and specifically in 1969, there was a bungled police raid on a gay bar in San Francisco, and it became known as the Stonewall Riots. When this took place, the gay bar was also a big drag queen outlet, providing services for money. And in an effort to revolt against what the police did, the ability or the option of dressing in drag became kind of a revolutionary statement. We're going to be against the police, and we're going to be against the traditional heterosexual system that we all know. As this moved into the 70s, there is a French man, he's a sexual philosopher named Michel Foucalt. And Michel fancied himself as someone who helped revolutionize and actually is now considered the father figure of the queer theory. He involved himself in everything that you can think of, but his main focus was what he called boy lovers, which are simply adult men having sex with underage youth. He wrote many essays and books and gathered a lot of followers. One of them was a woman named Reuben. She was a female sexual activist in the United States. She spent most of her young years in the sexual underworld in San Francisco, but she then started writing essays and books that were published here. She gathered quite a following and was focused on fighting for the civil rights of sexual deviants in the United States. One of her followers, Judith Butler, wrote a book called Gender Trouble. It is still taught in several colleges in the United States today. Also another one named Sara Hankins. They focused on the genre of drag, and they focused primarily on helping people understand that drag performances and dressing in drag satisfies a lot of people's hidden fetishes. And so as they progressed through the 80s, this movement was unable to really gain a lot of traction. except for kind of in the subcultures, and that is until this gentleman, Harris Kornstein, came to the scene. His stage name is Lil Hot Mess, and he knew that if we were going to have drag queen performances become normalized in the United States, he had to participate in mass media and social media platforms. And so he worked together with these two other ladies and published a manifesto for drag queen. It's called The Drag Pedagogy, The Playful Practice of Queer Imagination in Early Childhood. This manifesto referred heavily to the French philosopher Foucalt and Butler as the sources of their movement. Their focus in this manifesto is to help teach kids how to live queerly. They also are focused in their manifesto on bringing the queer ways into the education of young children, primarily under the age of 10. So it's important as you start to say, okay, is this just some fun little thing? No, you need to learn the background of what's going on. If you understand the background of communism, you understand what they're doing. If you understand the background of drag queens, you understand what they're doing. And one of Kornstein's main focus is that if we lift all the adult deviant sexual practices up to a normal level, then those that are heavily regarded as wrong, like pedophilia, would also rise as well, kind of the rising tide lifts all boats theory. So, while their goal is to reform children's relationship with sex, sexuality, and eroticism, they describe drag as a site of queer pleasure and promises children to turn rejection into desire. So if we have this as a background, we need to understand that how does this apply to Rexburg? What's going on in Rexburg? We have, some supposed innocent drag performances in Porter Park. What are we upset about? If we understand the background, and then we look at what is going on in Rexburg. In 2021, Rexburg Police Department received 4 reports of sexual assault of young people ages 11 to 17. In 2022, that number went up to 49 in 1 year. Of those, 48% were assaults by acquaintances, people they barely knew. 36% were by a friend. Now, as we look at what's going on with this movement and with other things that are sexually deviant, what we need to know, and as I talk to local counselors, 1 in 3 girls of this number that were sexually assaulted in Rexburg and 1 in 4 boys were found to have been sexually groomed as a young child. Sexual grooming is what this is all about, is that if you break the normal barriers that children have when they are revolted by things, and you start to normalize their exposure to graphic sexualization, that gives them the ability, or I should say it reduces their ability to resist being molested and then assaulted. The facts of this and the data of this is well published, well researched, and grooming of children is something that happens in Rexburg. It happens in our ward buildings, it happens in our homes. When my mother was 16, she was molested and raped by a young men's president. When my younger sister when she was 8, she was molested by our branch president. And so I have seen firsthand the effects of what goes on. And so as we look at these numbers, we might say, well, 49, that's not so many. We live in a community with thousands. 1 is too many. 1 is too many. So what are our goals tonight? We're asking you, we're petitioning you, we're pleading with you to help stop children from being groomed sexually from any source, and to stop them from having childhood innocence destroyed. Having a drag queen read a book that the drag queen's hips go swish, swish, swish is not something that our young children need to hear. It's not innocent. It's not something that's playful. We need to protect them from predatory adults, especially men dressed as sexually body caricatures of women. That's not what our children need. And Rexburg has prided itself for years in having high moral standards, in being a community that's safe for our children. And so we need to maintain that. And you guys can do that. That's your job. It's really your job, is to help protect the children, if nobody else. Our plan of action is we'd ask you to draft and present to the public a city ordinance specifically restricting any and all lewd, sexually charged, erotic performances to provide adult venues for those only. Historically, drag performances were in private places. They were in places that were not allowed, where children were not allowed. We're not saying we want a law passed that outlaws drag performances. We actually can't ask you that. But what we can say is keep it out of the public square. Keep it out of the area where kids can see it. And this includes public library, parks, school libraries, anywhere where children can be. We definitely don't need to give anybody the opportunity to groom children. We just don't need it. It does not need to be here. I want to say as well that there are several state statutes, and I have them listed here in my race tonight to get ready. I was going to make a copy of all these statutes. I can do that for you, but I'm sure that Steve Zollinger, the city attorney, can get you to these easily.
We have them. Yeah, we have them. In fact, I've got
But
them
these
right
statutes give you the background and the basis to draft your ordinance. So you don't have to dream up why you're doing this, or what your moral background is, or what to do. And Steve has the knowledge and the background. He can draft an ordinance that can be able to withstand any court challenge. So I have confidence in that. Some of you may know who Tim Ballard is. He's the founder of Operation Underground Railroad. I've met him, I've talked to him, and I support his organization. But this is a quote that I wanted to share with you. He said, "I've spent almost 18 years hunting child predators, mostly men who want to have their way with children in a sexual context. I can state with authority, there is no innocent or normal reason for a man to dress up as a sexualized woman and then dance in a sexual fashion for children. This is predatory behavior, period." So I'm asking you to take a stand. I'm asking you, as a council, review the information I've given you, do your own research, but present an ordinance to the community. Let us have a public hearing about an ordinance where we can protect our children from being groomed sexually. That's what we're asking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.